Hi Toby, I've decided to go back to a video recording because as much as I thought your idea was absolutely brilliant about speaking whilst showing you the report and highlighting what I was talking about, I couldn't get it to work. Hopefully at some point later in the degree process I will, but I thought this was better than just a normal voice recording. So I've read through your LO4, I found it very interesting, and I've just got a few comments to make. But first of all, I would just like to clarify what my understanding of the action inquiry is. So I think maybe I'm a bit out of sync with a lot of people, and so maybe my comments aren't valid. But anyway, in my opinion, from my understanding, the action inquiry that we've been asked to do is to pose a hypothesis, which we then choose an action that we can implement ourselves as practitioners. We research the effect of that action, and we gather data and analyse that data, and that then informs a second, third, fourth cycle potentially. But it is then very clearly an action that we do, which we then collect data about, analyse, and then further actions. So if I come to your report, Toby, first of all, a similar point that I made to Julian, and again I think I'm out of sync with a lot of others, so maybe I'll be wrong on this, but I think the title is not in the format that works best for a research project. I think it needs to be more of a stated hypothesis, which is then discussed within the body of the report. But again, maybe very wrong on that. Not certain at all. You refer to KS 4 and 5. Clearly, I know that's key stage, and I suspect the examiners will. But I think we are encouraged to write in longhand and assume ignorance on the part of the examiner, I suppose. So I think that could just do with being, as I say, in longhand. However, you then go on to talk about MEA thinking frame. I have no idea what you're talking about there, Toby. Others may do, but again, I think that could do with some explanation and description for your audience. You, at this stage, I have to say, with this sort of first paragraph and description of the first cycle, I'm not clear what your first action was. You talk about highlighting the need for drive and heightened engagement with my students. That's not clear to me that that's an action, a practitioner action that you're planning, and I can't see what the action is. I think you do need to be a bit clearer about what your first action is that you're then gathering data about. You talk about collecting data, but not with reference to a particular action. So I just think you need to put that in. You also, I know you discuss it further later in the body of your report, but I think at this stage it would be useful if you were clearer about what sort of data you collected, whether it was an interview, questionnaires, some other form. I think that could do with being clarified. If I go on to page 2 of your report, Toby, you talk about collecting the data, reviewing it, and coding it, finding categories, which is absolutely my understanding of what we're supposed to do. But I think you probably could have, I would have liked anyway, to see a bit more description about the data that you gathered, so I could understand why you chose the 3 categories that you did. I think that might have helped me to understand the processes that you were going through and how your research was going. You talk in the 3rd paragraph about themes and codes affirming your first action. Again, I'm not sure what your first action was, Toby. I think you do definitely need to clarify that. You do say this was the introduction of a wiki for students, but that seems to be your action for your second cycle, because you say you ended the first cycle with a wiki in place and used this state as the context for the second cycle, in which case, in my understanding, that was your second action. So you then go on to talk about your data collection for your second cycle. Again, I think you should clarify how the questions were asked, how the data was collected, maybe even sample size. I'm sure this is all in your appendix, but I think it could do with being in the body of your report. Right, you talk about, bear with me one moment. Oh, I can't pause it, so bear with me while I just gather my thoughts. Right, in the second cycle, I think again I was a bit unsure about the triangulation of your data. You say that at this point I thought it useful to gather my own reflections. I think you just need to clarify whether it is at this point I thought it was useful to start using a journal to record my reflections, or at this point did you decide to analyse your reflections. And I think I would like to see more clearly how you, what correlation or otherwise you found between the data that you got from your journal and the data that you got from students, to see what patterns that you found from the different forms, different sources of data. If I go on to the last page of your report, Toby, you say, first paragraph, there seems to be a conflict of ethos with the wiki platform and the mentality of Key Stage 4-5 students. I think you just need to expand on this really and justify it somewhat with either the data that you've gathered or with some literature that you can find. And the same applies really to the next paragraph. I think at some point, possibly around here, you need to be looking for some literature which works with or against your report. You go down to talk about your thoughts, and with further development the comments of blog posts could prove to be on parity with the effectiveness of the collaboration aspect of the wiki. Again, there's not, to my mind at least, much data to confirm that. So I think you should look at that and how that's presented. So really, Toby, just to be clear, I thought it was a very good report, and I'm amazed that you managed to do it in the short time frame you had available to you. A lot of my comments may be informed or otherwise by my lack of technological know-how, so I apologise if that's the case. But I think I was confused between the cycles and the data and what applied where. I was not clear about how you triangulated your data and how you'd proved that you'd used different sources to compare. I thought there should be some literature somewhere in there with reference to the research that you were undertaking, and there was just a little bit of jargon that could be tidied up very easily, but well done. I hope you found some of this useful. Like I said to Julian, I do find it much easier to be critical when I'm speaking, because hopefully you can hear in my voice that I'm unsure. I'm not stating this as fact, and I hope I'm not coming across as somebody who's lecturing you from a position of authority, because I'm not. I'm feeling my way very much like you guys and finding the process quite interesting. So thanks for listening, Toby.